Think about the last conversation you were in where someone barely said a word, not because they were shy, not because they had nothing to say. They just waited, they listened, and when they finally spoke, something strange happened. You leaned in, you took it more seriously. You probably assumed they were the smartest person in the room. Why? They did not prove anything. They did not present credentials. They just stayed quiet, and your brain decided that meant something. Here is the question that should bother you. If silence reads as intelligence, who taught your brain that? And more importantly, is it actually true? The answer is more complicated than you think, and it has been quietly shaping every conversation you have ever had. Social psychologist Rodney Klassen ran a series of studies on what he called verbal dominance and perceived competence. What he found was striking. Participants who spoke less were consistently rated as more intelligent, more thoughtful, and more authoritative than participants who spoke more, even when the content of what both groups said was identical, word for word, the same sentences. The quieter person was trusted more. But why? Here is what is actually happening. When someone talks a lot, your brain gets to evaluate everything they say, every filler word, every half-formed thought, every moment of uncertainty. The more someone speaks, the more data you have, and the more chances they give you to find a weakness. The person who stays quiet gives you almost nothing to evaluate. And here is the critical part. Your brain does not respond to absence of information by concluding nothing. It fills the gap. It assumes. And what it almost always assumes is positive. Psychologists call this the halo of silence. The less someone reveals, the more your imagination fills in what they must be like, and it fills it in generously. So here is the first question you should be asking yourself right now. Every time you have felt the urge to fill a silence in a conversation, to keep talking, to add one more thing, to explain yourself a little further, what were you actually doing to how the other person perceived you? You were handing them evidence, and evidence can only go one way. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. This effect does not just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself in the conversation. A 2019 study by researchers at the University of Michigan found that people who spoke less in group settings reported feeling more in control of the conversation, not less. The act of choosing silence rather than being forced into it created a sense of agency that talkers simply did not experience. The quiet person was not passive. They were running a completely different strategy, one that the people around them could not see. And this raises a question that is worth sitting with. In every meeting, every date, every conversation where you felt the need to perform, to demonstrate your value through words, were you actually performing for the other person, or were you performing for yourself, filling your own discomfort with sound? Because the research suggests that most verbal oversharing is not communication, it is anxiety wearing the costume of conversation. Now here is the uncomfortable reversal. Does staying quiet actually make you smarter? Or does it just make you seem smarter? Psychologist Adam Grant has written extensively on the difference between people who perform intelligence and people who demonstrate it. His finding, and this is the part worth remembering, is that the most genuinely intelligent people in any room are almost always the ones asking the best questions, not delivering the best answers. Think about that for a second. The person who asks a question that nobody else thought to ask just revealed more about their thinking than the person who talked for 5 minutes straight, and they did it in one sentence. So the strategy is not silence for its own sake. It is the deliberate replacement of statements with questions. Every time you would have made a point, turn it into a question instead. Every time you would have explained your position, ask about theirs first. Watch what happens to how the room treats you. And now the question that this video was always building toward. If silence makes people assume intelligence, and you now know this, every quiet person you have ever met looks slightly different. That colleague who never speaks in meetings, that person at the party who just listened and smiled, the friend who always seems to know exactly when not to talk, were they naturally quiet, or were they running a strategy you could not see? And here is the one you really cannot shake. Which one are you going to be in the next conversation you walk into?